After 15 years of loyalty, Queen Regent Sova stood before the throne she had protected and listened as the young king she had raised cast her out of the kingdom. Not a single voice rose in her defense. Not because the court agreed, because nobody could believe what they were hearing. King Ronan sat rigid beneath the crown, his ice blue eyes fixed on the woman who had taught him how to read, how to rule, and how to survive the night his parents died. The royal decree trembled slightly in his hand. Sova never argued, never pleaded. Regent Queen Sova remained motionless as the royal decree was read aloud. Every word struck the room like a hammer. Stripped of authority, removed from office, banished from the kingdom. A ripple of disbelief swept through the court. Many expected outrage. Others expected tears. Instead, Sova reached for the silver wolf seal pinned above her heart, the symbol she had carried for 15 years. Her fingers lingered there only briefly. Then she crossed the distance to the throne and placed it gently beside Ronan's hand. Then she bowed. "If your majesty truly believes this kingdom is safer without me, then I will leave." Silence. Not the silence of agreement. The silence that follows a wound. Ronan kept his expression steady. This was necessary. It had to be. This was what kings did. Yet something felt wrong. Terribly wrong. His gaze swept across the room. Nobody was looking at Sova with anger. Nobody looked relieved. Nobody looked victorious. They were looking at him. The generals. The nobles. The servants gathered near the doors. All of them. As though they had just witnessed something they wished they could undo. Then she turned away from the throne she had protected for 15 years and walked toward the palace doors. Several servants lowered their heads. One young maid covered her mouth to hide her sobs. Sova never slowed, never turned back. Behind her, a frail voice emerged from the shadows. The old royal archivist. His eyes never left Ronan. "You have just banished the only person who knew why your father died." And suddenly the victory no longer felt like one. 15 years earlier, the kingdom smelled of smoke, not the comforting smoke of hearth fires drifting through village streets. The smell hanging over the capital that night came from burning roofs, shattered towers, and funeral pyres already being prepared before the dead had even been counted. Rain fell in thin silver sheets. It hissed against blackened stone. Soldiers moved through the ruined palace carrying the wounded. Nobody spoke above a whisper. Nobody wanted to be the person who said the words aloud. The king was dead. The Lunar Queen was dead. And somewhere inside the palace, a 3-year-old heir had become an orphan before he was old enough to understand the meaning of the word. Sova stood alone in a dim corridor. At 26, she wore mourning black. Not for her rulers, for her mate. 3 weeks earlier she had buried him. The child she had carried died with him. Some wounds were so large they hollowed out entire parts of a person. She still felt that emptiness every morning, every night, every moment in between. Footsteps approached. Fast. A royal guard appeared at the end of the corridor. "My Queen Regent." His voice broke. Sova already knew. Whatever remained of her old life was about to disappear. The guard led her through the palace, past broken windows, past blood-stained marble, past servants wiping tears from their faces. Eventually they reached the royal chambers. The little boy sat alone on the edge of a massive bed, small hands gripping a blanket, wide blue eyes staring at the floor. Ronan, the future king. The last surviving member of the royal bloodline. He looked impossibly small, like a child who had wandered into a nightmare and forgotten how to wake up. An elderly advisor stepped forward. The king left instructions. Sova's chest tightened. The advisor handed her a sealed letter. The royal crest had been pressed into the wax. Her fingers trembled as she broke it open. The message inside was brief, direct. Written by a dying man running out of time. Protect my son. Protect the throne. Trust no one else. For several moments, she simply stared at the words. Then she looked toward the child. He had not moved, had not spoken, had not cried. That somehow hurt more. Children should cry when their world ends. The silence felt wrong. The advisor cleared his throat. There are others willing to assume guardianship. Of course there were. Power always attracted volunteers, especially when that power sat on a throne. Sova folded the letter, slowly, carefully, as though the paper might fall apart. Then she crossed the room. Ronan finally lifted his gaze. Fear lived there. Confusion. Shock. The desperate uncertainty of a child searching for someone familiar. He looked at her the way drowning people look at shorelines. Sova knelt in front of him. Neither spoke. Words would have been useless. Instead, she held out her hand. The little prince stared at it. 1 heartbeat. 2. 3. Then his tiny fingers wrapped around hers. The decision was made. Not by councils. Not by laws. Not by royal decrees. By a frightened child who had chosen someone to trust. And a grieving woman who found she could not walk away. The years that followed demanded everything. Sova learned quickly that ruling a kingdom and raising a child were not separate jobs. They became the same thing. By day, she negotiated trade agreements. By night, she sat beside Ronan's bed after nightmares woke him screaming. She taught him his letters. She taught him history. She taught him why kings listened before speaking. When fever nearly took him at age 6, she remained beside him for 6 days without sleep. When older noble children mocked him for crying at his parents' memorial ceremony, she marched straight into the courtyard and ended it herself. The kingdom watched. People remembered. Not because she performed grand acts of heroism, because she showed up. Again and again. Year after year. When floods struck the northern villages, she went. When famine threatened the western territories, she went. When wolves attacked isolated settlements near the border, she went. And somehow Ronan was always beside her, learning, watching, growing. The kingdom healed slowly. So did he. By the time Ronan reached 13, he had become everything people hoped for. Smart, brave, charismatic. The future looked secure, yet small things had begun changing. Subtle things. The sort that barely registered at first. Whenever Sova entered a village square, people smiled. Whenever she left, they waved. Children ran toward her. Elders blessed her. Farmers greeted her by name. One summer afternoon, after a council meeting in a distant town, Ronan wandered through a hallway searching for the training yard. 2 noblemen stood nearby. They hadn't noticed him. Their conversation drifted through an open doorway. The kingdom owes everything to Regent Sova. A low chuckle followed. Without her, we'd have fallen apart years ago. The other man nodded. No argument there. She practically carried this kingdom on her back. Ronan stopped walking. The words were harmless. The men meant them as praise. Yet something uncomfortable settled inside him. The feeling had no name. Not yet. He continued toward the training grounds. But the voices followed him. The kingdom owes everything to Regent Sova. Without her, without her, without her. That evening, he stood on a balcony overlooking the capital. Far below, people filled the streets. Laughing, trading, living. The kingdom his parents had died to protect. The kingdom he would someday rule. Behind him, cheers erupted from the great hall as Sova entered another gathering. Ronan glanced back. Even from a distance, she seemed to pull people toward her. Effortlessly, naturally, as though trust followed her wherever she went. For reasons he couldn't explain, the sound of those cheers lingered longer than it should have. And for the first time in years, a question took root in the young heir's mind. What if the kingdom needed her more than it needed him? Ronan never remembered the moment people began stepping slightly out of his way. It didn't happen all at once. Nothing important ever did. It was gradual, like dawn bleeding into the sky before the sun was ever seen. At first, it was only servants who straightened a little faster when he passed. Then guards who lowered their eyes a fraction longer than necessary. Then nobles who spoke his name carefully, as though weighing whether it belonged fully to him. And always, at the center of it all, Sova. She moved through the kingdom the way silence moved through a crowded hall unnoticed, until everything adjusted itself around her. Ronan stood at the edge of council chambers one afternoon, half hidden behind carved stone pillars, watching her speak. She didn't raise her voice. She rarely needed to. Even the men who believed themselves powerful leaned forward when she addressed them. Not out of fear, out of certainty. That was what unsettled him most. Certainty did not bend easily. A map of trade routes lay open across the table. Border tensions, harvest projections, military supply shortages. The council argued in overlapping voices until Sova lifted a single hand. The room changed immediately. Not silent, controlled, as though the air itself had been instructed to behave. Ronan felt it again, that pressure behind his ribs that had no proper name. He stepped back before anyone saw him watching. Outside the chamber, stone corridors stretched long and cold. He walked without direction, footsteps echoing back like reminders he didn't want. Somewhere behind him, laughter broke out. Faint. Warm. Not his. It followed Sova. Always her. That evening, the royal training yard was nearly empty. Ronan struck the practice post harder than necessary. Wood cracked under the force. Sweat slid down his wrists, stinging where his grip tightened. Still not enough. He struck again, and again, until breath burned in his lungs. Until the sound of impact stopped feeling like progress and started feeling like noise. "Careful, Your Majesty." The voice came from behind him. A council lord. Elderly. Carefully dressed. Carefully chosen words. Ronan didn't turn immediately. He already knew who it was. "There are better ways to spend strength than breaking training posts," the man continued. Ronan finally looked over his shoulder. The man's gaze wasn't hostile. That would have been easier. It carried something worse. Expectation. "Regent Sova would advise restraint," the lord added gently, as though offering wisdom. The name landed quietly. Still, it changed something in the air. Ronan set the practice sword down. Too carefully. "Everything in this kingdom comes back to her name," he said. "Not accusation. Not question. Just fact." The lord hesitated. That hesitation answered more than words ever could. "Yes," the man finally admitted, "because she has carried more than most would survive." Ronan turned fully now. The yard felt smaller, tighter. "Then what does that make me?" he asked. The question wasn't meant to be spoken aloud, but once spoken, it could not be taken back. The lord didn't answer quickly enough. That silence did it. Ronan walked past him before anything else could be said. Night fell without announcement. The palace never truly became dark, only quieter. Sova still worked. She always worked. Even when the rest of the kingdom surrendered to sleep, her presence lingered in places she had already left. Ronan found her in the library. She stood between towering shelves, one hand resting on a stack of sealed documents. Candlelight softened the edges of her face, not making her weaker, making her harder to read. She didn't turn immediately. "You've been avoiding the council reports," she said. No question in it, only awareness. Ronan stepped inside fully. The door closed behind him with a sound that felt louder than it should have. "I've been training," he replied. That wasn't an answer. A pause. He hated how she noticed everything without seeming to try. She finally turned. Silver blue eyes met his. Calm, unmoving, as if nothing he said could surprise her anymore, or hurt her. That thought irritated him more than it should have. "I don't need council reports to swing a sword," he added. "No," she agreed softly. "You need them to know what you're defending." The words weren't sharp. That made them worse. Ronan's jaw tightened. You make decisions without me. Sova's gaze held steady. I make decisions for the kingdom. A pause. Not defensive. Not apologetic. Simply true. Ronan stepped further into the room. The shelves seemed taller now. He felt smaller than he had any right to feel. They listened to you before they listened to me, he said. It came out quieter than intended. Something closer to honesty than complaint. Sova's expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes shifted. Not confusion, recognition, as if she had seen this coming long before he had words for it. They listen because they must, she said. That's not what I asked. Silence stretched between them. The candles flickered. Somewhere deep in the palace, a bell rang for the changing of guards. Time continuing as if nothing important was happening. Sova set the documents down carefully. I did not raise you to compete for their attention, she said at last. Ronan exhaled sharply. Maybe that's the problem. The words landed harder than intended. Even he felt it. A fraction of stillness passed through her. Not offense. Not anger. Something more restrained. Something held back. You think I am your problem? She asked. Ronan didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was messier than that. And messier truths were harder to speak. Before he could find words, footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Urhan. Fast. A guard appeared at the doorway. Breath unsteady. Eyes fixed on Sova. Regent, there has been a breach near the eastern border archives. Sova didn't hesitate. She was already moving. Ronan followed instinctively. No, she said without looking back. Stay. It wasn't harsh. It was final. And that finality stopped him more effectively than any command. He remained in the library as she left. The door closed. Footsteps faded. And, for the first time, the silence that followed did not feel empty. It felt occupied by something he couldn't yet see, something already growing in the space between them. On the table, one of the sealed documents had shifted slightly, as if it had been disturbed earlier and never noticed. Ronan stared at it longer than he should have. Then, slowly, he reached for it. The wax seal was not royal. It was older, and it bore a symbol he had never seen before. But something about it made his pulse change its rhythm. Outside, in the distance, bells rang again. This time sharper. Urhan. And somewhere in the palace, voices began to rise. The palace archives were never meant to feel alive. Yet that night, every corridor beneath them seemed to breathe. Cold stone, old ink. The weight of centuries stacked behind locked doors. Ronan moved through it alone. The guard stationed at the upper stairwell had not asked questions when the young king passed. Authority did that silenced curiosity before it formed. Still, something about the guard's eyes lingered. Hesitation without explanation. That same hesitation followed Ronan deeper underground. The seal he had taken from the library burned faintly in his mind. Not physically. Something worse. A thought that refused to settle. The archive doors stood ahead. Massive iron-reinforced wood. 2 royal locks. Both already opened. That detail alone should have stopped him. It didn't. Inside, rows of sealed histories stretched into dim candlelight. Records of wars. Treaties. Bloodlines. Executions never spoken of in court. And at the far end, a single desk already lit. As if someone had been expecting him. Ronan stopped. For the first time that night, uncertainty pressed against his ribs. Footsteps should have been impossible here, yet he heard none. Only the soft shifting of parchment. Then, a voice, calm and measured, without surprise. You were never meant to come down here. Ronan turned. Sova stood beside the archive desk. No crown, no court presence. Only a dark travelling cloak drawn loosely around her shoulders, as if she had been interrupted mid-task rather than summoned by fate. Her presence did not fill the room. It steadied it. That realization irritated him. You had the locks opened, he said. Not question. Observation. Sova didn't deny it. The breach at the eastern border was not an attack, she replied. It was a distraction. Ronan's jaw tightened. You left council discussions for this. I left because someone wanted me to leave the council. That landed differently. Not accusation. Pattern recognition. Ronan stepped closer. The symbol on the seal in his hand felt heavier now. I found this in the library, he said. Sova's eyes flicked briefly to it, then away. Not shock. Not panic. Restraint. That should not be in your possession, she said. Something in her tone made the air tighten. Ronan held it up. Everything in this kingdom ends up under your control eventually. Silence followed. Not empty. Measured. Sova turned slightly, facing the shelves of sealed records rather than him. You think control is what this is about, she said. Ronan gave a short, humorless breath. What else would it be? That question did something to her expression. Not anger. Something older. Tired. Careful. You were a child when your father died, she said quietly. I remember. No, she corrected. You remember what you were allowed to keep. The words struck a space behind his eyes. Ronan stepped closer to the desk. This seal, he said, belongs to no house I recognize. Sova did not look at it again. She was already deciding something. He could feel it. Where did it come from? He asked. Still no answer. Only a shift in her stance. A decision forming long before this moment. You should not be down here, she repeated. Ronan's voice lowered. Stop speaking like I'm still a child you can redirect. That landed. Not loudly, but deeply. Something flickered in her gaze at last. Not surprise. Acceptance of distance growing, where closeness used to exist. You are not a child, she said. A pause. Then, quieter. And that is what makes this dangerous. Footsteps echoed above. Multiple. Vast. Armored. The archive doors trembled as voices shouted from the stairwell. Ronan turned sharply. What is that? Sova was already moving. People who think I am no longer required, she said. The words carried no fear, only calculation. The doors above burst open. Metal clanged. Orders shouted. Ronan caught fragments through the stone. Secure the Regent's records. Do not let her leave the archives with them. His pulse shifted. Leave? He repeated. Sova moved past him toward the deeper corridor. You need to go, she said. Ronan followed immediately. No, that answer came too fast. Too certain. Sova stopped walking, not fully turning. Only enough for him to see part of her profile in the dim light. This is not your fight yet, she said. The word yet hung in the air longer than it should have. Ronan's grip tightened. It becomes my fight the moment you involve my kingdom. Something passed through her expression then. A fraction of something unspoken. Then she did something unexpected. She placed the sealed document, his document, into his hand. Not gently. Not roughly. Deliberately. Then learn quickly, she said. The sound of boots reached the corridor behind them. Closer now. Ronan looked down at the seal. Then back up. But Sova was already stepping away into the darker passage beyond the archive shelves, leaving him standing between pursuit and something he had not yet understood. Voices erupted behind. Metal scraped stone. The guards had entered, and Sova did not look back. Ronan took one step after her, then another. But the corridor ahead had already swallowed her silhouette. And from the darkness where she disappeared, a final line reached him without urgency, without emotion, only weight. Some truths are kept alive only by silence. The guards turned the corner behind him, and everything he thought he understood about his kingdom began to fracture in their footsteps. Ronan did not sleep. The sealed document lay on the table before him like something alive, quiet, patient, refusing to reveal itself until the moment it decided. Every time he reached for it, His hand stopped just short. Not fear, something more frustrating. Uncertainty that had nowhere to settle. By dawn, the palace was already awake. But it was not the same palace that had gone to sleep. Something had shifted overnight. Not visibly, not loudly. In the way people avoided eye contact longer than necessary. In the way guards changed positions without explanation. In the way servants moved faster, as if trying to outrun questions forming in their minds. Ronan walked through it all toward the council hall. Each step felt heavier than the last. Doors opened before he reached them. Not respect. Anticipation. Inside, the council was already gathered. Nobles lined the long table. Generals stood behind their chairs instead of sitting, as though no one had yet decided where authority belonged. At the far end stood Sova, unchanged, still, composed. That steadiness struck him harder than any defense she could have spoken, because nothing about her looked like someone preparing to be accused, only someone who had already accepted what was coming. Ronan took his seat. Silence followed. Not court silence. Waiting, silence. The kind that holds its breath before impact. A council lord stepped forward. Carefully chosen. Carefully rehearsed. Your Majesty, the man began. Last night there was an unauthorized breach of the royal archives. Ronan did not look away from Sova. I am aware. A flicker passed through the council. The lord continued. It has been reported that the Regent Queen was present during the breach. No reaction from Sova. That lack of reaction made the accusation feel less like an attack and more like confirmation. Ronan finally spoke. Present, he repeated. Yes, the lord said. And several classified records appear to have been accessed. A pause. Then the words that had clearly been prepared long before today. Records related to the death of your parents. The room changed. Subtle. Immediate. Ronan felt it in the shift of weight around the table. Every gaze turned towards Sova. Waiting. Not for truth. For collapse. For denial. For anything that would make this easier to believe. Sova remained exactly as she had been since he entered. Still. Present. Unmoved. Ronan's fingers tightened against the armrest. He forced his voice to stay level. Did you authorize access to restricted royal records? A simple question. But it did not feel simple. Not here. Not now. Sova met his gaze. No hesitation. Yes. The answer landed without softness. No defense followed. No explanation. Only truth, left exposed. A murmur passed through the council. Someone exhaled sharply. Someone else shifted, as if preparing for something unpleasant. Ronan did not move. The answer should have ended uncertainty. Instead, it deepened it. Why? He asked. That single word carried more weight than the decree that had once crowned him. Sova's expression shifted slightly. Not guilt. Not defiance. Something contained. Because the archive was no longer safe, she said. That is not an answer. It is the only one that matters. The council erupted quietly at that. Not chaos. Controlled outrage. One of the generals stepped forward. Your Majesty, he said carefully. This is precisely what we warned about. The regent has operated without oversight for years, accessing sealed royal records without consent. Stop. Ronan's voice cut through the room. The general froze. Silence returned instantly. Ronan stood. Slowly. The crown felt heavier than it had ever felt before. Not physically. Something else. Expectation. All eyes turned toward him. Sova did not look surprised by his rise. She only watched, as if this moment had already been accounted for somewhere long before it arrived. Ronan stepped forward. Tell me what was accessed, he said. Sova did not speak immediately. That pause was new. Not hesitation. Choice. I accessed only what was necessary, she said finally. For what? Her gaze held steady. For keeping the kingdom intact. A laugh almost formed in the council but died before it reached sound. Ronan felt something tighten behind his ribs. You are speaking in circles, he said. No, Sova replied. You are only now noticing the shape of what has been standing in front of you for 15 years. That silence afterward was different. Sharper. Ronan stepped closer. You removed information about my parents, he said. Sova did not deny it. Yes, the word was simple, but everything around it fractured. The council lord seized the moment. Your Majesty, this confirms it. Unauthorized concealment, manipulation of royal records. This is treason against the crown. Ronan lifted a hand. The room stopped. Not because the accusation ended, because his silence replaced it. He looked at Sova. For the first time that morning, something in his expression was no longer controlled. What did you hide? He asked. The question did not sound like command. It sounded like something breaking under its own weight. Sova's answer came quietly. I did not hide it from you. A pause. I protected you from it. That distinction meant nothing to the council, but it meant too much to ignore. Ronan's breath tightened. Protected me from my own history? Sova's gaze did not waver. From what your history would do to this kingdom if spoken too soon. The council erupted again. This time louder, more certain. Enough. Ronan's voice cut through it. Silence returned in pieces. He turned toward the council, then back to Sova. And something in him hardened not into anger exactly. Into decision. I have heard enough, he said. The words hung. Final. Sova did not move, did not plead, did not interrupt. Ronan turned fully toward the hall. By authority of the crown, he said, voice steady despite everything beneath it. Regent Queen Sova is stripped of all authority and exiled from royal service effective immediately. No applause followed. No relief. Only a silence that felt too heavy to belong in a room full of people. Sova closed her eyes briefly. Just once. Then opened them again. Not toward the council. Not toward the crown. Toward him. For a moment, something unspoken passed between them, too complex to name, too fast to hold. Then she lowered her head. Not in defeat. In acknowledgement. I accept, she said. That acceptance did not feel like surrender. It felt like completion. Ronan expected something else after that. Anything else. But Sova did not argue, did not defend, did not reveal what he was still waiting to hear. She simply turned and walked out of the council hall. No sound followed her footsteps. Not even the room dared to breathe fully until she was gone. Only when the doors closed did the council begin to move again carefully, uncertainly, as though reality itself had not yet decided what it had just witnessed. Ronan remained standing. The crown pressed against his thoughts like something unfamiliar. Victory should have felt clearer. Instead, what lingered was something far more difficult to dismiss. The absence of resistance. And beneath it, the unsettling sense that nothing about what had just happened felt complete. The kingdom did not begin breaking with noise. It began with hesitation. A border captain delayed a response he would once have acted on immediately. A trade convoy vanished because nobody realized two competing lords were quietly sabotaging one another. A dispute between neighboring territories sat unresolved for 3 weeks because every council member assumed someone else was handling it. Small failures, forgettable failures, yet they multiplied. And somehow every path led back to the same absence. Sova. The name nobody spoke. The name everyone noticed. Ronan spent longer hours in council chambers than ever before. Reports arrived faster than answers. Every solution seemed to uncover 2 new problems beneath it. For the first time since claiming the throne, he began to understand something he had never fully seen while Sova stood beside him. The kingdom had not survived because crises never appeared. It survived because someone had always reached them first. And now that someone was gone, one evening, long after the palace had fallen quiet, Ronan stood alone in the war chamber. Maps covered the table. Colored markers tracked disputes spreading across the kingdom. Several were linked by thin threads of coincidence. Too many coincidences. His gaze narrowed. The eastern province. The Southern Trade Guild. House Varick. Again. Another report. Another delay. Another disruption. The same names surfaced repeatedly. Not openly. Never enough to prove intent. Only enough to create discomfort. A knock interrupted his thoughts. The royal archivist entered. Age seemed heavier on him than it had a month ago. Perhaps truth aged people faster. Ronan did not look up. You have something. The old man nodded. I do. Then he placed a wooden box onto the table. Small, dark, unremarkable. Yet the moment Ronan saw it, something tightened inside him. The royal crest had been carved into the lid. His father's crest. Not the kingdom's. His father's. The difference mattered. The archivist stepped back. She told me never to open it. Ronan finally lifted his eyes. Who? The old man almost looked offended. You know who. Silence settled. Ronan reached forward. The lock had already been broken. Recently. His pulse quickened. Why now? The archivist's expression darkened. Because she is no longer here to stop me. Ronan opened the box. Inside sat a bundle of letters, a leather journal, and several sealed documents marked with the names of noble houses. At first, none of it made sense. Then he saw the names. House Varick, House Thornwell, House Merrow, 3 of the oldest noble families in the kingdom. 3 houses whose influence stretched across nearly every territory. 3 houses currently represented within his council. Ronan frowned. What is this? The archivist's answer arrived quietly. The reason your father died. The room seemed to shrink. No dramatic realization. No lightning strike. Only stillness. Ronan unfolded the first document. His father's handwriting. Sharp. Urgent. The ink itself appeared angry. If this reaches Sova, then I am likely already dead. The conspiracy reaches deeper than we feared. Varick. Thornwell. Merrow. The evidence is attached. They have spent years buying influence within the court. They believe my death will place the kingdom in their hands before my son comes of age. Ronan stopped breathing. Only for a moment. Then continued. Page after page. Letters. Payments. Witness statements. Names. Dates. Evidence. Not rumors. Proof. Enough proof to destroy entire bloodlines. Enough proof to ignite a civil war. The archivist remained silent while Ronan read. The candles burned lower. The kingdom outside continued turning. Inside the chamber, 15 years of history unraveled. Then he found the final letter, the one addressed to Sova. His hands trembled before he even opened it. The seal had already been broken years ago. Sova's fingerprints seemed almost visible on the worn edges. He unfolded the parchment, and his father's voice returned from the dead. Sova, if you are reading this, then I have failed to stop what is coming. You must not reveal these names. Not yet. The kingdom will demand justice. The council will demand arrests. The people will demand blood. Give them any of those things too soon, and the kingdom burns. The houses have buried themselves too deeply. Half the army serves them. Several governors owe them favors. 3 neighboring territories depend upon their trade routes. Expose them now and we will exchange 1 funeral for 10,000. Ronan's eyes moved across the page. Slower now. Every word seemed heavier than the last. You must protect my son until he becomes strong enough to survive the truth. Not merely hear it. Survive it. Because the day these names become known, every ally will become suspect. Every friendship questioned. Every victory examined. He will lose his innocence in a single afternoon. Let him keep it while he can. A painful knot formed in Ronan's throat. His father continued. You will be blamed for things you cannot explain. You will be forced to act without credit. You will be hated for silences that protect people who will never thank you. Endure it anyway. You are the only person I trust to carry this burden. Then came the line that shattered whatever certainty remained. If my son someday turns against you because he cannot yet see what you carry, forgive him. The fault will be mine, not his." Ronan lowered the page. His vision blurred, not from tears, from the sudden realization that his father had seen this coming. All of it. The distance, the resentment, the exile, the betrayal. 15 years earlier, a dying king had predicted the exact wound Ronan would one day inflict. The silence stretched. The archivist finally spoke. "You want to know what she did with those 15 years?" Ronan looked up. The old man's eyes held no judgment, only exhaustion. "She prevented a civil war." A pause. "Every year." Ronan said nothing. The archivist continued. "When House Merrow tried placing loyal officers inside the army, she quietly blocked the appointments." Another pause. "When House Thornwell attempted to seize grain routes during the drought, she negotiated around them." "And House Varick?" The old man laughed once. A tired sound. "House Varick spent 15 years trying to control the throne." He looked directly at Ronan. "They never realized Sova was standing between them and you." The words landed harder than any accusation, because suddenly the pattern became visible. The trade disputes, the council pressure, the constant criticism, the whispers, the accusations, the campaign that had convinced him she was too powerful, too influential, too trusted. Not coincidence. Strategy. 15 years of strategy, and he had helped finish it. Ronan looked down at the evidence covering the table. The names of men who had attended council meetings, men who had advised him, men who had encouraged his suspicions, men who had applauded when Sova lost her authority. A cold realization settled into place. They wanted her gone. The archivist nodded. More than they wanted power. The room felt unbearably quiet, because Ronan finally understood. The conspiracy had not ended 15 years ago. It had simply changed shape, and Sova had spent 15 years holding it back, alone, without recognition, without explanation, without defense, until the one person she protected most had removed her himself. The letter remained open before him, his father's final words staring back from the page. "Protect her as she protects you." Ronan closed his eyes. Too late. Far too late. Then the archivist spoke again, quieter than before. "There is one thing you still don't understand." Ronan looked up. The old man hesitated. "For the first time that night, she didn't leave because you exiled her." A pause. Heavy. Measured. "She left because she finally finished the promise she made to your father." The words settled over the room. And suddenly Ronan understood something even more terrifying than the conspiracy itself. Sova had never been staying for the throne. She had been staying for him. And now that promise was fulfilled. She had no reason to return. The road beyond the capital felt longer than Ronan remembered. Not because the distance had changed, because certainty had. For most of his life, every road led somewhere he understood. A battlefield. A council chamber, a village needing aid, a throne waiting for him to sit upon it. This road led somewhere else, toward a woman he had wronged, toward a conversation no crown could protect him from. The horse carried him through open countryside beneath a pale sky. Villages passed, fields rolled by, hours disappeared. Yet the letter never left him. His father's handwriting remained burned into memory. "Protect her as she protects you, even if you never understand why." Ronan had understood too late, far too late, and now every mile felt like a measure of that failure. By afternoon, the village appeared. Small, quiet, the sort of place most kings would never notice, the sort of place Sova had always noticed. He dismounted near the square. Children ran through sunlight. Merchants arranged baskets of fruit. Life moved gently here. No urgency, no politics, no throne. Then he saw her. Sova stood beneath a large oak tree near the edge of the square. Several children sat around her. She was helping one of them mend a torn book, patiently, carefully, the same way she had once helped him sound out difficult words beside a fireplace 15 years ago. The sight struck him harder than he expected, because nothing about her looked incomplete. She looked peaceful. For the first time in years, one child laughed. Sova smiled. And suddenly Ronan understood something that hurt more than guilt. The kingdom had never been the thing she wanted. It had simply been the thing she carried. The children eventually scattered. Only then did Sova look up. Their eyes met. Neither moved immediately. The years between them seemed larger than the village itself. Finally, Ronan stepped forward. Sova rose to her feet. No crown, no regent's seal, no symbols of authority. Only the woman who had stayed when everyone else left. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence felt familiar, not uncomfortable, only full. Ronan had imagined this meeting 100 different ways. None survived reality, because every prepared speech collapsed the moment he stood in front of her. Sova waited, not rescuing him, not making it easier, simply waiting, the way she always had. And for the first time in a very long time, Ronan stopped speaking like a king. I read the letters. Her expression softened slightly. Nothing more. I know. The answer almost made him laugh. Of course she knew. Sova always seemed to know things before they happened. Ronan looked away briefly, toward the village, toward anything except the woman standing in front of him. Then his voice lowered. I thought I was punishing you. The words felt heavier once spoken. Sova remained silent. So he continued. I thought I was protecting the kingdom. A pause. His throat tightened. But I wasn't. The admission hung between them. Rav. Unprotected. I was punishing the only person who never abandoned me. The wind stirred softly through the trees. Children's laughter drifted from somewhere distant. Yet the world suddenly felt very still. Sova's eyes never left him. Not judging. Not forgiving. Simply listening. And somehow that made everything harder. Ronan swallowed. Then finally said the words he should have spoken weeks ago. Words he should have spoken the moment he understood. I was wrong. No title. No ceremony. No explanations. Just truth. I was wrong. His voice shook slightly. Not much. Enough. I believed strangers over the woman who raised me. The sentence broke something open inside him. Years of resentment. Years of insecurity. Years of feeling overshadowed by the very person who had protected him. All of it suddenly looked small, childish, cruel. I kept asking why people trusted you. His gaze dropped. I never stopped to ask why. Silence followed, long enough for him to feel every word, long enough for regret to settle fully into place. Then he looked at her again, and for the first time since childhood, Ronan looked lost. Not the king, not the ruler, the boy who had once reached for her hand after losing everything. I'm sorry. The words came quietly. No grand speech. No dramatic declaration. Only honesty. I'm sorry for what I did. Sova closed her eyes briefly. Just once. When she opened them again, there was sadness there. But not anger. The anger had never been the wound. The wound had always been loss. You hurt me, she said softly. Ronan nodded immediately. I know. The honesty surprised even him. No defense followed. Because there wasn't one. Sova studied him for a long moment. Then something in her expression shifted. Not because the pain disappeared. Because she finally believed he understood it. You were afraid, she said. Ronan almost argued, then stopped. Because she was right? Not angry. Not manipulated. Afraid. Afraid he would never matter as much as she did. Afraid the kingdom needed her more than him. Afraid he would never become the king his father had been. And fear had convinced him to mistake loyalty for control. His shoulders lowered. The truth felt exhausting. Yes. A faint sadness touched her face. I know. Those two words nearly undid him. Not because she excused him, because she understood him. Even now, after everything, the same way she always had. Ronan laughed once. A broken sound. You always know. A small smile appeared. Brief. Familiar. The first real smile he had seen from her in weeks. The sight almost hurt. Then the smile faded, and the silence returned. This time gentler. Ronan looked at her. Really looked at her. Not as regent. Not as protector. Not as the woman everyone admired. As family. And suddenly the thing he had come to say became very simple. Not political. Not strategic. Not royal. Personal. Deeply personal. He stepped closer. Sova. The use of her name alone felt different. She waited. And Ronan finally asked the question the entire journey had been leading toward. Not, come back and rule. Not, the kingdom needs you. Not, return to court. Instead, come home. The words hung in the afternoon sunlight. Simple, human, honest. For the first time since becoming king, Ronan wasn't asking for her service. He was asking for her. Nothing else. Just her. Sova stared at him. And for the first time since he arrived, emotion reached her eyes completely. Not surprise. Not triumph. Something far more fragile. Something she had spent 15 years refusing to hope for. Ronan's voice lowered. The kingdom will survive. A pause. I finally understand that. Another. But I don't want to lose you. The words settled between them, and neither looked away. For a long moment, Sova said nothing. Then slowly, very slowly, she smiled. Not the smile of a regent, not the smile of a ruler, the smile of a woman who had carried a promise for 15 years and finally laid it down. And when she answered, her voice was almost lost beneath the wind. Then let's go home. And for the first time in 15 years, neither of them carried the kingdom alone. The throne room was full again, just as it had been on the day Sova was banished. The same nobles, the same generals, the same council seats, the same throne. Yet nothing felt the same, because this time, everyone knew the truth. Word had spread through the kingdom faster than any royal messenger could travel. The royal archives had been opened. The late king's records had been verified. 15 years of hidden evidence had finally emerged into the light. And now the kingdom waited. Not for a war, for a judgment. Ronan sat beneath the crown. His expression revealed nothing. Weeks earlier, he would have welcomed the certainty that position offered. Now he understood something different. A throne did not make difficult decisions easier. It simply made them unavoidable. Before him stood 3 groups of guards. Between them knelt the men who had once believed themselves untouchable. Lord Varric, Lord Thornwell, Lord Merrow. Age had changed them. Power had not. Even now their faces carried traces of arrogance, struggling against fear. For 15 years they had hidden behind influence, behind wealth, behind titles, behind carefully arranged alliances. Today none of those things protected them. The room remained silent. No one wished to interrupt history. Ronan rose. The movement alone seemed to tighten the air. A royal servant stepped forward carrying several leather-bound documents. The evidence. Witness statements. Financial records. Letters. Payments. Every piece preserved by Sova across 15 long years. Not because she wanted revenge, because she understood that truth was worthless if it could not survive scrutiny. Ronan looked toward the gathered court. The deaths of King Aldric and Luna Queen Alara were not the work of foreign enemies. A murmur swept through the room. Most already knew. Hearing it spoken aloud carried a different weight. They were murdered. Silence followed. Heavy. Absolute. Ronan continued. For 15 years the kingdom believed their deaths were the result of a failed conspiracy whose architects could never be identified. His gaze shifted toward the kneeling nobles. That belief was false. The words struck the room like a hammer. Lord Varric's jaw tightened. Lord Thornwell stared at the floor. Lord Merrow looked suddenly much older than he had upon entering. Ronan lifted one of the letters. The parchment crackled softly. Your own signatures condemned you. No anger entered his voice. Only certainty. The most dangerous kind. He placed the letter down. Then another. Then another. Each piece of evidence exposed another layer of deception. Bribed officials. Secret payments. Manipulated military appointments. Years of hidden influence. Years of carefully concealed corruption. No one interrupted. No one challenged the proof. Because there was nothing left to challenge. The truth stood naked in the center of the throne room. And it was undeniable. Finally, Lord Varric spoke. Desperation had replaced arrogance. We acted for the stability of the kingdom. The excuse sounded pathetic the moment it left his mouth. Ronan stared at him. For a moment he remembered being 13 years old. Listening to nobles praise Sova. Feeling small. Feeling threatened. Feeling afraid. Fear had almost destroyed everything. The realization steadied him. You acted for yourselves. The words landed with far greater force than shouting ever could. Lord Thornwell tried next. The kingdom prospered. Ronan's gaze hardened. The kingdom survived despite you. Silence followed. No one came to their defense. Not one voice. Not one ally. Because the room finally understood something that had taken Ronan years to learn. The kingdom had survived because one woman had stood between ambition and catastrophe. His eyes moved through the crowd, then stopped. Sova stood quietly among the observers. No regent seal, no royal authority, no elevated platform. Just a woman standing near the back of the hall, watching. The sight carried unexpected power, because she had never wanted this moment, never demanded it, never sought it. She had simply endured long enough for truth to arrive on its own. Ronan turned back toward the prisoners. His voice remained calm, measured. A king's voice. But this time it belonged to a man who understood its weight. My father died because powerful men convinced themselves the kingdom belonged to them. A pause. It never did. No one moved. No one breathed. You stole a king. Another pause. You stole a queen. His gaze sharpened. You stole 15 years from this kingdom. The words settled over every person present. Not dramatic. Devastating. Because they were true. Ronan straightened. The guilty will answer for their crimes. Lord Varric closed his eyes. Lord Thornwell's shoulders sagged. Lord Merrow looked as though he had aged another decade. The titles of houses Varric, Thornwell, and Merrow are hereby stripped. A ripple moved through the court. Their lands are confiscated. Another ripple. Their political authority is dissolved. The room remained silent, waiting, wondering. Ronan continued. The individuals responsible for the conspiracy will spend the remainder of their lives imprisoned. No cheers followed. No celebration. Justice rarely sounded like victory. It sounded like finality. Then came the most important sentence. The innocent members of these families will not share their punishment. Several heads lifted. Surprised. Relieved. The crimes of fathers will not become the inheritance of their children. For the first time that day, Sova smiled. Only slightly. Yet Ronan saw it. And that mattered more than anything else. Because this was what she had protected. Not power. Not influence. Not revenge. The kingdom itself. A kingdom where justice remained stronger than vengeance. The royal guard stepped forward. Chains rattled softly. The conspirators were led away. Not dramatically. Not violently. Simply removed from history. Exactly as they deserved. The throne room remained quiet long after they disappeared. No one seemed eager to speak. As though everyone understood they had witnessed the end of something much older than a trial. 15 years of silence. 15 years of sacrifice. 15 years of misunderstanding. Gone. Finally. Ronan descended the steps of the throne. The court parted before him. Not because he was king. Because they recognized him. For the first time, not as a boy wearing a crown, as a ruler who had earned it. His eyes found Sova again. Neither spoke. Words were unnecessary. The truth stood between them now, unhidden, unbroken. And at last, the kingdom belonged to the future instead of the past. 6 months later, the kingdom had stopped asking where Queen Regent Sova belonged. The answer had become obvious. Everywhere. And nowhere. The throne room still stood. Council meetings still happened. Trade agreements were still negotiated. Border disputes still required attention. The kingdom continued exactly as kingdoms always did. The difference was that Ronan no longer carried it alone, nor did he expect anyone else to. The spring sun poured through the palace windows as servants moved through the halls carrying flowers for the annual Founders' Festival. Laughter echoed from distant courtyards. Music drifted through open arches. For the first time in years, the palace felt less like a fortress, more like a home. Ronan crossed the eastern gardens without escort, a habit that still irritated half the royal guard. He ignored their complaints. Some freedoms were worth protecting. The gardens had changed since winter. White roses climbed stone walls. Lavender bloomed beside the pathways. Children's voices floated through the warm afternoon air. Ronan followed the sound. He already knew where it would lead. A small gathering occupied the far side of the garden. Several children sat beneath an old oak tree. Books rested in their laps. One little girl struggled through a difficult sentence. Another boy offered a correction. Neither noticed the king approaching. Their attention belonged elsewhere. To the woman seated among them, Sova. Sunlight caught strands of dark chestnut hair as she leaned forward to help the smallest child sound out a word. No royal robes. No regent seal. No symbols of office. Just a simple violet gown and a patient smile. The same smile that had once appeared beside a frightened little prince struggling through his first lessons. The sight never failed to stop Ronan for a moment. Not because it surprised him, because it reminded him of everything he almost lost. One of the children finally noticed him. "Your Majesty." The others scrambled to their feet. Books nearly tumbled into the grass. Sova glanced up. Their eyes met. The years between them no longer felt like a wound, only part of the road that had brought them here. Ronan waved the children back down. "Continue." The little group settled again, somewhat less gracefully than before. A few minutes later, the lesson ended. The children scattered across the gardens, laughing, running, arguing over whose turn it was to carry the books. Sova watched them disappear around a hedge, then shook her head. "They listen about as well as you did." Ronan smiled. "I was worse." "You were." The answer arrived so quickly that he laughed. The sound surprised him. There had been a time when laughter felt inappropriate, irresponsible. Now it felt necessary. Sova returned her attention to the garden. The silence between them settled comfortably. No tension. No unfinished arguments. No invisible wall standing where trust used to be. Just peace. The thing both of them had spent years helping everyone else find. A servant appeared at the far end of the path. Nervous. Determined. Clearly searching for the king. Ronan saw him immediately. Pretended he hadn't. The servant approached anyway. "Your Majesty, the council is waiting." Ronan sighed dramatically. Sova raised an eyebrow. The servant looked trapped between duty and self-preservation. "The kingdom has survived 6 months without me attending one meeting on time." "It was 3 meetings, Your Majesty." Ronan frowned. "Was it 3? "It was 4. Sova's expression remained perfectly innocent. That made it worse. The servant looked increasingly uncomfortable. Ronan finally relented. "Tell them I'll be there shortly." The servant bowed so quickly he nearly lost balance before retreating down the path. Silence returned. Sova folded her hands in her lap. Still avoiding work? Ronan looked toward the palace, then back toward the path where the children had disappeared. Finally toward her. "Only the parts I can trust someone else to handle." A smile touched her lips. Small, warm, real. the sort of smile that could never exist in throne rooms. Ronan sat beside her beneath the old oak tree. The spring breeze moved through the branches overhead. Petals drifted across the grass. Beyond the gardens, the kingdom continued. Busy, complicated, alive. Exactly as it should. For years, Ronan had believed leadership meant carrying every burden himself. For years, Sova had believed love meant carrying burdens for everyone else. Both had been wrong. The strongest kingdoms were not built by people who stood alone. They were built by people who finally learned they didn't have to. Ronan leaned back against the tree. Sova did the same. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the leaves above them. And, for the first time since the night his parents died, Ronan felt something he had almost forgotten was possible. Home. Not the palace. Not the throne. Not the crown. Home. And beside him, at last, sat the woman who had brought him there. Thank you for watching. Like this video, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from.